How much does the Trump effect have to do with all of this?
We had taken a decision to look for FTAs with high consumption Western economies.
People are talking about the US-India deal, sir. And that is the flavor of the season right now.
In a particular kind of mood, he can say that if there's some problem elsewhere and he needs to show that he's pressuring India successfully, he can do that. But our calculation is that in any case, we're going to buy this.
How does the world reconcile with the fact that Europe is buying Russian energy?
They talk about human rights, but look at the kind of human rights that they violate by all these regime changes and imposing so much misery. Although Iran was the second biggest oil supplier to India,
sure.
Now we get zero.
In every budget, India gives some money, except for Pakistan and China. China clearly doesn't need it.
Russia has problems in Central Asia, on the western side, with Baltic states, with Poland, the European Union. They have big problems. America has even bigger problems with its neighbors. Special assistant in the White House, they conclude that India has started buying oil directly and indirectly from Russia.
The Indian armed forces, so we often speak about collusivity. So here we're speaking about Pakistan and China, presenting a united front in case of a war. We saw that in Operation Sindoor also, where Chinese intelligence, Chinese e-intelligence, satellite images, etc. were given to Pakistan.
Of hitting at the air bases and the air defense system of a nuclear-armed country like Pakistan. If they trouble us there in the way that you are describing,
sure.
We can hit them. We can hit them. And they have no response.
Ladies and gentlemen, the geopolitics of this world is getting far more complex than had ever been imagined. I'm a very sincere student of geopolitics. I have studied geopolitics for a long time, but somewhere it gets confusing every now and then. And this is like this intricate web which we are trying to make sense of. Today I have a very special guest with me. I have with me former Foreign Secretary and the current Chancellor of JNU, Mr. Kanwal Sibal. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Major Gaurav Arya and you're watching Open Corner. Sir, Jai Hind and a very warm welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sir, India is signing a spate of these trade agreements. I mean, we seem to be almost signing an agreement a month, whether it's UK or whether it's the UAE, then EU, now with the United States of America. How much does this have to do with Trump's tariff policies? Because some of these agreements have been decades in the negotiation process, sir. It's not like they started suddenly. I mean, we've been negotiating with the European Union for such a long time. And suddenly one day, Ursula von der Leyen says, is the mother of all deals. She announces it in Davos and we are signing deals after deals. How much does the Trump effect have to do with all of this?
Well, somewhat, maybe what you are saying is true, but not entirely. For this reason that we had this FTA with Australia some time ago. With the UAE, FTA was concluded within 90 days, very rapidly, but Trump was not on the horizon or pressures from the United States of America. We began discussing FTAs with other countries. Even the GCC, we had started discussing with them. Now we have once again accelerated that process. We had started negotiating an agreement with Canada before the relationship went downhill for reasons that you well know. With Peru and with another Latin American Chile, we were discussing the FTAs, and discussions are going on but not concluded. And then within BRICS, for example, we had an economic agenda, though there's no FTA or that kind of a thing. But nevertheless, these issues which are troubling today because of Trump were being discussed at that time. Now, the WTO has been wrecked by Trump now, and even during his first term. And Biden also, they refused to nominate anybody for the dispute settlement mechanism, which meant that disputes couldn't be settled. Now, what I'm saying is that we had taken a decision to look for FTAs with high consumption Western economies, where already we were selling a lot of goods and you could sell a lot more. And we did not join the RCEP for this reason, that it was actually a free trade agreement at the center of which was China. And then all the reasons why we want to keep the Chinese out from destroying our domestic economy and this and that, giving them free access to our economy and erode our economic strength from within. So we didn't do that. So the point I'm making is that the westward orientation, the geo-economic westward orientation of India has been long-standing, because our ASEAN FTA hasn't worked to our advantage. And with Japan also, we've not been able to extract the maximum out of that FTA. So what has now happened is that when Trump has wrecked the WTO, wrecked the global trade and financial system, imposed these tariffs on all countries, totally in violation of WTO, MFN rules. The process of signing FTAs with the European Union, for instance, got accelerated, there's no doubt. But the push did not alone come from us, only come from us. It came also from the European Union, because they have been humiliated by Trump. And they imposed this FTA on Europe, in which they got Europe to commit to one-sided bargains, where they would buy $750 billion of energy from the United States in the next 3 years, and will invest $500 billion in the United States. And Europe will be subject to 15% tariffs with no tariffs on the United States. Now this has been held up in the European Parliament. So there was an incentive on the part of the European Union too to accelerate this in order to increase their options and get access to an Indian market, which is becoming very, very attractive in the long term, since they can't move towards China because they have a huge problem with China of the kind we have, but it's a similar problem of China being able to export a lot of goods to Europe and not opening up their own market sufficiently to European goods. Plus, China has now taken so much advances in the latest technologies, emerging and critical technologies, EVs and this and that. So Europe thinks that their car industry will be wrecked or ruined if they gave free access or under FTA with China and this and that. So India became attractive. In short, the answer to your question is that our geo-economic thrust has been westwards, and that has been accelerated because of the policy that Trump has pursued against vis-a-vis all countries, and that incentivized Europe also to reach out to us, and hence we had this quick FTA with the EU, which was languishing for a long time.
So now people are talking about the US-India deal, sir, and that is the flavor of the season right now. But with Trump, many people say that he's mercurial, he's temperamental, and he is, to quote Mark Carney, rupturing the world order. People are saying that this trade deal will not hold. There are many experts who feel they've gone on the media and written about it. They're saying that, many facets of the deal that America is signing with a lot of countries, including India, it's going to be very difficult to go ahead with these deals because like you mentioned, Europe, sir, it's totally one-sided. India has been able to fend off, I think, quite successfully. And India's managed to get a pretty decent deal with the US. What do you say about this, sir? Because Trump does not. He might just backtrack himself tomorrow.
Both yes and no to your question. Yes, he has done this with South Korea because the South Koreans, the legislature, did not ratify the deal with the United States. Trump got very unhappy and he slapped 25% additional tariffs on South Korea after having concluded a deal.
Sure.
And he's doing with so many others. And even in our case, although it's not part of the trade deal, but he has, in his separate executive order, threatened to reimpose these 25% penalty tariffs, plus some other actions which he has not identified, if after monitoring at the very high levels on the US side, the Secretary of State, the Commerce Secretary, the Treasury Secretary, and the Special Assistant in the White House, they conclude that India has started buying oil directly and indirectly from Russia. So he's kept that thing with himself, and that can be a problem going ahead, because in a particular kind of mood, he can say that if there's some problem elsewhere and he needs to show that he's pressuring India successfully, he can do that. So to that extent, yes, you are absolutely right. No, because unlike what he has done with some other countries, Indonesia, Pakistan, or some of the Asian countries, even South Korea, our trade deal, although it's being called a deal, actually has been negotiated very minutely. In the sense that they've gone through the tariff lines, 6 or 8, the FTAs. I'm not technically well informed about that, but I understand that it has been negotiated item by item, commodity by commodity, where there'll be 0 tariffs, there will be 18% tariffs, there'll be quotas, and etc., etc. So it's an extremely elaborate deal, which is why the Commerce Minister rightly said that the basic paperwork has already been done, and therefore when we move to the BTA, it will be not difficult, because there'll be not that much new, except some fresh issues will come, investment and government procurement and intellectual property rights, those sort of things will come in. But the trade part has been very minutely agreed upon. So, and then, as you know, the USTR said that India has never made these kind of offers to us ever. And he seemed pretty satisfied with the deal. So there'll be a lot to lose on the American side, because the way we are opening up to them on industrial products, on, if not a commitment, intention to buy $500 billion from them of various kinds. And I understood that actually government had very intensive discussions with all sectors of our industry to see what we can, in our own interest, in terms of our technological upgradation and other needs, buy from the United States looking ahead. And they, totaled all this, and they found that $500 billion is no great shakes. However, there is a little problem here, which is that in February last year, when Prime Minister went there and we had this joint agreement, it was agreed that we will raise the bilateral trade levels to $500 billion by 2030. But that $500 billion was predicated on we buying more from the United States and the United States buying more from us. But in this case, they buying more from us has not been addressed. But what we are saying, and I think there's some justification, though one can criticize that look, you've taken, even if it's not a commitment, but you've indicated that you will buy much more from them without any reciprocal agreement by them, they'll buy more from us. But our calculation is that in any case, we're going to buy this in order to upgrade our economy, upgrade our technological base, attract more investments and this and that. And in the budget, as you know, with these kind of safe harbors for IT companies and all, we are expecting a lot more investment to come in. So you're both right and not so right in your question.
So now, how does the world reconcile? You mentioned Russian oil, sir, and you said that Trump still holds that, so to say, stick that if you buy Russian oil again, I've got punitive tariffs of 25% on India, and I can always use that power that I have with me. How does the world reconcile with the fact that Europe is buying Russian energy? The Americans are buying Russian energy. I'm not even talking about the Chinese here, sir, who are the top buyers of Russian energy. I'm not speaking about the Chinese. I'm speaking about these so-called Western countries, blaming India, that India is buying Russian energy, which is fueling the Ukraine war. I'm sure you have been asked this question so many times. And I just want some clarity here, that don't they see what they're doing is absolutely the opposite of what they're blaming India for doing?
Of course. But how long, for how many years have we been talking about the double standards of the United States, of the West, and the hypocrisy of the West? It didn't start because of the Russian oil deal. It is a fact of life that they pretend to adhere to certain values, which they violate when it is in their self-interest to do so. They're one yardstick for their own conduct, and another yardstick for the conduct of the countries of the global south. They talk about human rights, but look at the kind of human rights that they violate by all these regime changes and imposing so much misery on people as they're now doing in the case of Iran, whatever the problems they have with Iran. But when the US Treasury Secretary says basically that we wreck their economy in order for the people to come to the streets and then promote the downfall of the regime, they're not worried about how it affects an ordinary person. We know what happened in Iraq and et cetera, et cetera. So this is nothing new. The global south is used to this. Now the Europeans have suddenly discovered that United States double standards are also being
because the shoes are on the foot now,
applied to them, and Carney suddenly has now discovered absolutely that the international order was basically a fraud, but they went along with it because it suited them, that kind of a thing. So, but you notice the Western media is not at all amplifying what Carney said. So, it's just been buried because it's very embarrassing for them, because then they admit that they are part of this entire charade that was going on for so many years about the rules-based international order and this and that. So to answer your question, I don't think that the fact that Europe continues to buy oil even now, and gas in particular, and the United States doesn't buy energy from the United States, unless you count uranium as energy. Yes, and they don't bother. They're still buying uranium. In fact, they increase their uranium purchases from Russia. If you look at the statistics, they're buying palladium and everything else. So they are also giving money to Putin to conduct his war in Ukraine. But somehow, if we buy oil, and then it is a problem because we are fueling his conflict. So his war against Ukraine. This is sheer hypocrisy and double standard. There it is. I mean, you can rail against it, you can criticize it, but at the end of the day, now Stephen Miller, the White House Deputy Chief of Staff, says very openly that international law, this and that, doesn't matter. Might is right. That's what counts. And Trump himself says, when he was asked, that is there any restraint on you of international law? He says, no. He says, what will restrain you? He says, my own morality and what I think is right.
And that's about it, sir.
That's about it.
In this year's budget in India, sir, traditionally we've been, some money has always been put aside for Chabahar, sir. In this year's budget, there was zero funds for Chabahar. Now, Chabahar port is extremely important for India, sir. And as you know very well, it gives us access to Afghanistan, it gives us access to Central Asia, and otherwise also, sir. Our relationship with Iran has been very, very important, a cornerstone of our foreign policy as far as the Middle East and countries in that region are concerned. Now, suddenly this year, India apportions zero for Iran, sir. How do you see this? Where does it take us with Iran, sir?
Well, as I understand, I don't have inside information, but what I understand is that $120 million that we had committed, that money we have given in advance to Iran so that they can continue the operations with our money. And we have not made any allocation in this year's budget. I think because with the United States and Trump in mind, and the fact being that it is very risky for our companies who are involved in Chabahar to violate U.S. sanctions. Because then the larger interested access to the U.S. financial system and the banking system gets blocked, and they don't want to take that risk. And it's not as if we have stepped back from our relationship in some areas with Iran when under threat of U.S. sanctions, for example, as part of the U.S. nuclear deal, we were told quite clearly that no defense exercises with Iran, no defense relationship with Iran, and you will stop buying oil. But of course, they allowed us some breathing time for that. And eventually, although Iran was the second biggest oil supplier to India, now we get zero. So it's not as if, in the larger sense, we have not buckled under pressure. So to say that buckling under pressure on Chabahar is something that we didn't do earlier, and it is something new, is not true. because you have to see where the balance of interest lies. Now, the other thing which government may have in mind to explain why they haven't included it in this budget is that it is a fluid situation. And let's say today the Iranians and the US are having discussions. Supposing theoretically they arrive at a modus vivendi, there's some kind of an agreement. And then in that process, Iran wants some sanctions to be lifted. If that happens, the door can be open to us. And we can still spend money and revive our financial backing to the project. I mean, that's always available to us. So I would read this as a tactical step, which the current situation demands, and don't want to give a handle to all these Katsa people and Lindsey Graham types and Trump himself, to use this as a battering ram against us unnecessarily.
So, now, I'd like to bring you to India's neighborhoods. And in every budget, India gives some money, except for Pakistan and China. China clearly doesn't need it. Pakistan needs it, but we won't give it to Pakistan. But whether it's Bhutan, whether it's Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, even Maldives, we give money every year. But there is this sense that our relationship with our neighborhood is not what it should be. On the other hand, it's China, which is very predatory in its tactics. For example, the Hanmantota port, sir. We all know what happened there, and China gives loans knowing full well that the country they're giving loans to has no method or mechanism of paying back. It's simply too much for that country to absorb, but they've taken the money and now they're caught in this debt spiral with China. Yet, China does not face the same hostility that we do. What are we doing wrong, or what are we doing different, or what is China doing different, sir?
Well, I think they're not doing anything different, except that they are not direct neighbors of these countries.
So
we are direct neighbors. Now, if you look at all the big powers and their relationship with neighboring countries, you will conclude that all of them have serious problems with their neighbors. Look at China. It has big problems with South Korea, with Japan, with Philippines, with Taiwan. So it's not as if they're able to manage. They couldn't even agree on a code of conduct in the South China Sea. They have problems, territorial problems with Vietnam, with Indonesia, with Brunei, this and that. They have problems. That is, Russia has problems in Central Asia on the western side with Baltic states, with Poland, the European Union. They have big problems. America has even bigger problems with its neighbors, whether it's Canada now and Mexico, but further afield, Central America, Latin America. Now they revived the Monroe Doctrine and the Donroe Doctrine, which I'm sure the Latin American countries are absolutely fuming.
Yes.
That this guy is trying to revive a colonial kind of a policy towards United States, towards Latin America. So all big countries have problems with their neighbors. Now, Turkey is not a big country in that sense, but look at the problems it has with its neighbors, with Greece, with
Cyprus,
with the Arab world, with Cyprus.
Yes.
And India's case is actually even in some cases special, because some of these countries were part of India, or if they were not physically part of India, they're part of India's civilization. So in the case of Nepal, where I served, they're very, very sensitive about their separate identity. They want to develop that separate identity. They don't want to be seen as part of the Indian civilization, if you like, in some senses. But more than that, they've always played the China card against us, because China to the north, after occupying Tibet, has become a direct neighbor. And they've called themselves a yam between two stones, and etc., etc. Bangladesh was part of India. And then there is the problem of the division of India. It all began in Bengal.
Sure.
The entire
It did.
thing.
Yes, sir.
And there are very, very strong Islamic sentiments and entities in Bangladesh, which were against the liberation of Bangladesh. In fact, some of them fought along with the Pakistani army against the Mukti Bahini and everything else. So those people have come to the top. Let's not go into the reasons about Sheikh Hasina's policies and stuff like that, but they've come on top. Pakistan and Libya we don't have to discuss. It's endemic. And with Mullah Munir as the field marshal with his anti-Hindu and anti-Indian strong sentiments, I don't think we can have any modus vivendi with Pakistan in the foreseeable future. Sri Lanka, again, there is a problem rooted in the Tamilian issue. Although the LTT business is over, nevertheless, the Tamilian issue is there, and India has been demanding whatever that amendment is, 15th or whatever the amendment is, that we stand up for the rights of the Tamilians. So this rankles them. And then, mind you, they have played the China card since the 1960s with a rubber rice deal. So it's nothing new, because all these small countries feel this huge India, to which their appendages has the power, if it so wants, to actually interfere in their internal affairs, in their domestic politics, create lobbies within their countries, which will throw up ruling classes, which will be tied up to India. We haven't done that because our way of dealing with our neighbors is quite different. But nevertheless, that fear is there.
That possibility exists.
Therefore, they want to hedge. As we want to hedge now, we are hedging with SCO and BRICS and everything else, American power and this and that. So they hedge also against India. And Maldives, again, is, the background, and there are Islamic elements in Maldives, which have been problematic for us. But they also have the same kind of, pressures within their system, not to be seen as tied to India and develop alternative options, whether it's China and not Turkey and this and that. We have to live with that reality. But I'll mention one thing here.
So,
because I get a lot of questions about this, and our discussions also, that somehow we have mismanaged our neighborhood. I don't think we have mismanaged our neighborhood. I mean, why can't we have the other optic, that our neighbors have mismanaged their relationship with India? After all, India is rising, huge country, they can benefit from the growth of our economy. And we have demonstrated time and again that we are the first country, to help them when the
first responder,
whenever there is a crisis.
Yes, sir.
But they absorb that, they take profit from that, but they don't change their basic policy. They think they can play along with us. There are sufficient fissures within our system they can exploit, and we are not a mighty right country. We have a different approach to international relations. So I would say that it's easy for me to say that if I was in our neighborhood, I would make sure that I do not allow the relationship with India to develop cracks to the extent that they begin to suffer themselves, and not take India for granted. And then with the rising India, third largest economy in 2030, and by 2050, maybe the second largest economy, whatever the figures we give, we will reach there, if not totally, but approximately. If we reach a $20-30 trillion economy, we can actually help all these countries to grow along with us.
Yes, sir.
But the ruling classes are sometimes, I've served in some of these countries, they're very inward looking, and they don't look at the larger picture. They're caught up in domestic politics, etc., etc.
And any outreach towards India could be seen as kowtowing to a bigger neighbor, and we are strong and we have the China option.
But if you look at the psychology, we have the same attitude towards the United States, no?
Oh yes, we do.
So, I mean, here the disparity of power being such, even if theoretically there may be advantage in strengthening our ties with the United States, but there are thoughtful people who say beware, because don't get embraced too tightly, because then they will smother you, because of the manner in which they deal with other countries, and they're totally unreliable. I don't think India has the same kind of policy framework within which we operate. We're different from the United States. That's a predatory country in so many ways. We've seen their action on the ground. We've not gone and invaded other countries and destabilized them and operated regime changes in order to, give opportunities to our capital, to our corporate sector to make profits from whatever political openings we create through regime changes. It's not our policy.
Yes.
But nevertheless, countries always try to hedge, and therefore we have to be realistic.
Absolutely, sir. Now, President Zelensky of Ukraine has made a very interesting statement. He says that in the month of June, there could be an agreement between Russia and Ukraine, midwifed by the US, so that there is peace. And he's saying that one of the big ticket items which is going to impact that is the midterm elections, which are happening in November 2026. How far do you think that the domestic situation in the United States is pushing Trump towards a certain foreign policy, specifically with respect to the Russia-Ukraine war, sir?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so, because he's been charged for a long time of being soft on Russia, to the extent that he's an agent of the Russian or what have you. And his policy towards Russia, is outreach towards Russia, actually is being questioned by the deep state. And they're doing everything possible to try and derail his efforts towards Russia, because the animosities within the US system against Russia are very deep standing, are long standing. And they date to the Cold War and communism and everything else. And now they find that Putin is standing in the way of preventing them from getting access to the massive resources of Russia, that this man is too strong. He has to be weakened. He has to be kind of a Yeltsin kind of a person, so that they can take hold of. Now, Trump, being a businessman, is also looking at the possibility of how he can create opportunities for his buddies, to have access to Russia's natural resources. I don't think he's motivated. His basic motivation, couple of things. One is Biden fixation. That Biden did this, and I have to reverse what Biden did. And mind you, there's another element that's working here, because the Biden company and all, they created this Russiagate thing and this and that. So he's smarting under that. Secondly, he has no love lost for anybody, Zelensky included. So he can discard anybody, as he did Elon Musk. He can discard Zelensky and go ahead with whatever larger thing he has in mind. So when you talk about the June thing, I'm a bit puzzled that he said June. I think what he has in mind is that in the winter, military operations are difficult on the ground.
Yes.
You understand the thing.
Yes, sir.
So when it comes to June, then military operations can begin in a very serious way. And if Zelensky does not relent, and he's actually standing in the way of a peace agreement,
sure,
then Russia may actually step up its ground operations and make more advances on the ground. So he wants to be able to resolve that before that kind of a thing happens. But to answer your question, I don't think this is dictated by domestic politics. Maybe what he has in mind is the 2027 Nobel Peace Prize. So he gets peace there, then I suppose
he has a chance.
He has a chance.
Yes, sir. So my last question is that the Indian Armed Forces, so we often speak about collusivity. So here we're speaking about Pakistan and China presenting a united front in case of war. We saw that in Operation Sindoor also, where Chinese intelligence, Chinese e-intelligence, satellite images, etc. were given to Pakistan in that military conflict. Now, there is this very important Bangladesh factor, sir. I'd like your opinion on this, because do you think this is something that both Bangladesh and Pakistan together could be playing, telling China that you fund both of us, look after both of us, and we look after your interest by saying that, okay, here is India in the middle, there is Pakistan to the west, there is Bangladesh to the east, and we pressurize India from both directions, because these voices have come from within Bangladesh that if there are separatist movements in the northeast, we will give them shelter inside Bangladesh. A lot of influential people in Bangladesh, retired officials, especially from the armed forces, have said that. So do you think that this is a possible scenario, sir?
I don't think so. Because after Operation Sindoor, I think these countries, if they're seriously studying the change in India's military outlook, they would know that if you could take this enormous risk, in some senses,
yes, sir,
of hitting at the air bases and the air defense system of a nuclear-armed country like Pakistan, if they trouble us there in the way that you are describing,
sure,
we can hit them. We can hit them. And they have no response. Pakistan did try and have the capacity to respond. It just didn't work well enough. Next time it won't be that easy for us, I think. They will try and see where the weaknesses were and try and remove those weaknesses. But Bangladesh, we can handle that. That is number one. Number two, I think that the fact that Pakistan actually, and it's true, they approached us for the ceasefire and this and that because they were being hammered. And they knew that our Navy was going to take massive action. We had masked that, and it's true. They sought a ceasefire. And I think the Chinese might have advised them because their stakes in Pakistan are so high, they wouldn't like the Pakistan military to be defeated and then lose power within Pakistan. If there was that kind of a visible defeat, it's a different matter. They have covered it up. But China may have told them, hold on, go in for the ceasefire. I don't think that they would have not consulted China on this. But with regard to what you said about China providing them satellite intelligence and everything else, may I leave a thought with you?
Sure.
Don't you think that the Americans would have done that? Because their capacities for monitoring the movements of the Indian armed forces
are far more.
And especially on the sea.
Sir.
China doesn't have it.
Yes, sir.
So I leave that thought with you.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you very much for talking to us, sir, and it was wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sibal here. We spoke about so many things. We spoke about America, about the sanctions and the tariffs, and about the war that could end or may end. I'm talking about the Russia-Ukraine war. We spoke about India's position on Iran and then India's neighborhood. Thank you for joining us for this lovely, lovely discussion. I'll be back again with another special guest very soon. Till then, Jai Hind.